A very good morning, students. Welcome to RPS Group of Schools online classes of science. Today, we will continue with Module 4 of the chapter of biology in your textbook called Body and Movements for class 6th. In this Module 4, we will learn about joints. We will learn about types of joints. We will come to know the types of movable joints, and lastly, we will learn about muscles. Joints. A joint is a point where two bones meet to provide a framework that permits movement. A joint, also known as an articulation or articular surface, is a connection that occurs between bones in the skeletal system. The type and characteristics of a given joint determine its degree and type of movement. Bones are attached with to another by tissues called ligaments. Ligaments connect the bones, forming the joints and prevent the bones from falling apart during movement. Ligaments are stretchable and elastic, and so they allow the bones to move at the joints easily. Joints can be classified based on structure and their function. Types of joints. As we discussed, joint is a point at which two separate bones meet. There are three main types of joints in the human body. They include fixed or immovable joints, also known as fibrous joints, slightly movable joints or cartilaginous joints, and freely movable joints, also known as synovial joints. In some joints, the bones are held so tightly together that they cannot move at all. Such joints are called fixed joints. The function of fixed joint is to provide strength, support, and protection to the delicate organs which cannot withstand any kind of deformation. Fixed joints occur in our skull. The plate-type bones of our skull are held together by fixed joints and cannot move at all. The hard and strong skull protects a delicate organ of our body called brain. Partially movable joints. These joints allow partial movement of bones. For example, joint between two vertebral bones and the joints between ribs and breastbone. In case of freely movable joints, one bone moves freely on the other. Such joints are found in shoulder, hip, knee, elbow, ankle, and wrist. Let's discuss the types of movable joints. Freely movable joints are of the following types: ball and socket, hinge joint, pivot joint, gliding joint, and saddle joint. Let's discuss about these type of joints one by one. Ball and socket joint. They are found in the hip area and joints of the shoulder. It allows movement in all directions, which can be attributed to its rounded shape. This round end fits into the cavity of the other bone, thus allowing the movement. In the ball and socket joint, one end of the bone has a round shape like a ball, which fits into a socket in the other bone. In the ball and socket joint, the bones can be turned in any direction, that is forward and backward, side to side, and even rotated. The ball and socket joint occur at the shoulder and hip in our body. A ball and socket joint allow much more movement of bones. Next, talk about hinge joints. This is a joint which moves like a hinge in a single plane not more than 180 degrees. It provides back and forth movement of the structure. This is a joint which can be compared to that of a hinge in the door. Examples of hinge joint are the elbow joint and the knee joint. We can bend our arm only in one direction, that is, forward and backward. This is because our elbow is a hinge joint at the lower arm bones. The lower end of the upper arm, that is humerus, is in the shape of a knob, and the upper end of the lower arm is in the shape of a cup. The knob of upper arm bone fits the cup of lower arm bones to form a hinge joint at the elbow. Pivot joint. In a pivot joint, a cylindrical bone turns in a ring-type bone. The pivot joint allow rotation around an axis. A pivot joint exists between our skull and the top of vertebra of bone. A pivot joint between our skull and neck allows our heads to bend up and down from side to side. Let's talk about gliding joint. Gliding joints are a common type of synovial joint or movable joint. It is also known as a plane or planar joint, which consists of an oval-shaped end of one bone fitting into a similarly oval-shaped hollow of another bone. This is also sometimes called an ellipsoidal joint. This type of joint allows angular movement along two axes, as seen in the joints of the wrist and fingers, which can move both side to side and up and down. The lower leg to the ankle joint and the forearm to wrist joint are the two main examples of the gliding joint. Saddle joint. Saddle joints are so named because the ends of each bone resemble a saddle, with concave and convex portions that fit together. Saddle joints allow angular movements with a greater range of motion. An example of saddle joint is the thumb joint, which can move back and forth and up and down, but more freely than the wrist or fingers. The thumb is the only bone in the human body having a saddle joint. Let's talk about muscles. Muscles are attached to the bones and is responsible for the movement of human body. There is a change in the length of muscle due to contraction and relaxation. Muscle is the fibrous tissue in the body that has the ability to contract. Muscles are attached to the bones of our skeleton through strong fibers called tendons. The bones are moved by the alternate contractions and relaxations of the two sets of muscles. The bones act as levers and joints act as fulcrum. A muscle can only pull a bone, so another muscle attached to the same bone has to contract to move it in the opposite direction so as to bring it back to its original position. This means that two muscles work together to move a bone. When one muscle of the pair contracts or shortens, then other muscle of the pair is stretched or relaxed. The movement of the body parts in human beings is brought about by the alternate contraction and stretching of the muscles attached to the movable bones of the skeleton. The contraction of muscles is controlled by the brain. Tendons are the bands of tough fibrous connective tissue that join muscles to the bones. That's all for this chapter, students. Thank you very much. Take good care of yourself. Hope you have understood the chapter. Goodbye.